Welcome to the Real Chili Podcast.
And the Golden Eagles of Marquette University in Milwaukee are bound for the Final Four for only the third time ever.
5 seconds left. Marquette down by one, trying to avoid the upset. Blue the drive, the left hand. It's good. 1 second to play. Vander Blue has put Marquette in front by one.
And I want to win every day as basketball players, as students, and I want to win every day, most importantly, as people.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Real Chili Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lavender. I've got Pete Worth and Pete Mohan on the line today, and we are here to do a post-mortem on the 2K Classic. Marquette had a rough couple of days going up against Michigan, against Pittsburgh. Not a lot of positives to talk about, but we're going to dive into both games, talk about what we saw. I really don't know what was more depressing, if it was the absolute drubbing that Michigan gave us, or if it was a totally winnable game against Pittsburgh that we just let slip through our fingers. Pete Worth, it was a depressing couple of days for Marquette fans.
Yeah, it really was, and it got off to a fairly good start when we were, hanging tough with Michigan for the first 15 minutes. We looked like we were kind of even with them, even though they were getting a lot of open looks. We were getting open looks as well. We were moving the ball, getting good shots. And then it all just kind of fell apart from there. And the guys at Paint Touches did a really good kind of side-by-side breakdown of the pick-and-roll defense, which we'll talk a little bit later in the Michigan game. But Michigan was way better than any of us expected. I think way better than any of their own fan base expected, and especially Brendan Quinn, who we talked with from M Live.
It was way better than Vegas expected.
Yeah. Brendan Quinn, who we had on the last episode that covers the Michigan team for M Live, I think he had a tweet that said, who is this team? They were much more athletic and much better defensively, especially, than anybody thought. And then the Pittsburgh game, we let two of their guys just kind of own us at the end, and our defense fell apart eventually there too. We relied too much on too few players and didn't get really anything from our seniors. That's kind of the overall general talking of it.
My takeaway from kind of these two games, Pete Mohan, is that both teams have big, kind of across the rosters, have big, tall, athletic guys in a number of different positions, particularly at the 2 through 4, and that's going to give us troubles all year long. You think about teams like Xavier, teams kind of in that vein, that we're going to have some big troubles all year long with teams like that.
Yeah, I agree. Well, first off, I just want to say that we are 2-0 against schools named after people, and 0-2 against schools named after places. So our next 3 games are...
Okay, so looking forward...
Our next 3 games are against places, and so that doesn't bode well until we play Georgia, I believe, named after a queen, correct?
Aren't most places named after people, though?
We're going to be undefeated then.
So anyway, I thought really our defense was the issue for the most part, except really the first half of the Michigan game. It was inexcusable how many turnovers we had in that first half of the Michigan game. It was embarrassing. One thing, though, I think is that, Michigan, they have an experienced coach. Obviously, he knew how to pick us apart using the pick and roll, back cuts, and the John Beilein special open 3-pointers. I think last year we ran a lot of zone because we had to. This year, when we're looking for growth in our team and we expect, at least defensive effort in trying to be that man defense identity, we weren't able to get growth in that area from last year because we were spending so much time running zone. So it's not like we've experienced playing against a team that can be that creative in their plays and in their game plan to attack a man defense. And so you could see the inexperience in communication against Michigan. The other thing is just size. What's the guy on Michigan with the short shorts he had a double-double?
DJ Wilson.
Right, DJ Wilson. He made us look like high school players out there.
Yep.
I think anytime you get a large, agile player that one of Helt or Fisher can't guard for one of their deficiencies, that we're going to struggle. And then you saw it again against Pittsburgh and Michael Young, who absolutely ravaged our defense all by himself, especially in the second half.
We're a small team. We identified that from the start. We added some size. We got people like Hauser, Reinhardt. Let's put a note in this. Be sure to talk about Reinhardt a bit later because I think we need to address that. But we're not going to fault these guys or the coaching staff for not being able to physically match up with some of these teams. Michigan was better at every position on the court. They're bigger, certainly, at every position on the court. But where we can't have those lapses...
More experienced,
right.
Definitely.
But where we can't have the lapses, particularly on defense, is communication. If we're giving up size already, we can't have these pick and roll miscommunications. I think Pete Mohan, your point about we were in a zone for most of last year, so even the guys that are returning don't have the intricacies of the man-to-man pick and roll defense down. Pete Worth, before we hopped on the line, I know we were talking a little bit about the pick and roll, but we're running a pick and roll defense where we try to trap the ball handler in the pick and roll, immediately leaving the roller open, and there seems to be some serious communication issues about who's picking up that open roller when the ball handler is double teamed. Is that the way you were seeing it? I know you mentioned the Peyton Touches article.
What I noticed the most was not necessarily the screen itself, but the weak side defense and the help defense was nowhere to be found, and guys with their backs turned to the ball, guys not even looking, facing their man as opposed to even looking where the ball's at. And that happened in the Pittsburgh game too. If Michael Young had the ball on the wing and guys were nowhere near the paint to help clog that paint, help it make a more difficult shot, then Young just taking the ball right to the hoop. And a lot of that has to do with our depth, or not, our lack of size, I should say.
Well, they're all guards. I mean, they're all guards by trade,
right.
So they don't have that instinct to play help defense. Maybe Hauser is the closest one.
Yeah,
and that's why he's getting minutes at the 4.
We were relying on Hauser and Juwan and Reinhardt to do that. All basically have been perimeter guys their entire lives. And like Mike, you mentioned, or Pete, you were talking about, them not playing a lot of man last year. But if you grow up playing basketball, that's the first thing you learn is man-to-man defense. It's like you got to have some semblance of idea, have some basic understanding of help defense when you're playing man-to-man. And so I don't really see that as a legitimate excuse for the defense that we were showing. I think it's more of the fact that the Michigan especially was just bigger and more talented than us, more talented than I thought. For sure, just kind of looking at their first 2 games. I mean, they look like a top 15 team for sure.
This issue with the pick and roll defense, and I want to stick with this a little bit longer, is, I think this is an issue both coaches and players need to address. Coaches can't be out on the floor having players make sure their eyes are in the right spot. But coaches have the responsibility to put players in the best position to win. And we've known we were going to play a man-to-man defense since we added depth to the roster. I understand there's a learning curve in coming to more familiarity with it. But the coaches have a responsibility here to make sure that these players understand where their eyes need to be and where they need to rotate on these pick and rolls. I don't think the pick and roll defense broke our back. I don't think it was the one reason why we lost either of those games. There were a number of factors, but it's certainly a contributing factor, and it's something that not only should be addressed, but can be addressed. It's not a rocket science fix that needs to take place there. There just need to be some adjustments. So hopefully in the coming games we can see that adjustment from the coaching staff and greater recognition from the players.
The thing about Michigan, too, is not to harp too much on them, but all 5 of their players can shoot the ball. I mean, I think all 5 of them hit threes at some point during the 2K Classic. And we haven't even mentioned their game against SMU, which I watched a little bit of, and they dominated them, too. But all 5 of them having the capability of shooting the ball allows all 5 of them to be able to perform a pick and roll. And they executed that perfectly in those 2 games.
Mm-hmm. Michigan shot 60% from the field in the first half and just totally took us out of the game. I mean, that game was, clearly we all saw it, that game was over by halftime. So your point about, they shot lights out, and with that combined with their size, I hesitated to even talk about that game on this podcast because I don't think there's much positive we can. It's a burn the tape kind of game.
Yeah. Well, okay, we talked a lot about Michigan and on our defense. What did you guys think about our offense, especially Pittsburgh game second half?
Well, I thought it was interesting to see Wojo ride with Rousey, pretty much as the primary ball handler throughout the second half. Yeah, I don't know if that says more about Tracy and Marcus Howard than it does about Rousey, but the thing that I did see about Rousey that I didn't expect is his ability to penetrate and either get a shot off. Obviously, he failed at that on the final play of the game, but he was able to find guys for easy baskets in addition to his outside shooting, which, you like to have that dual threat aspect with your point guard, and I don't think that Marcus Howard showed the same stature heading towards the hoop when he's been out there. And obviously Tracy's shortcoming is kind of his shooting, although he can make a three-pointer from time to time. I think what's going to be interesting to watch going forward, not only at the point guard position but throughout the team, is Wojo going to see, is he going to ride the hot hand when guys are making shots? Is he going to put the ball in their hand down the stretch and just let that guy shoot because he's the only one making shots that game?
Just looking at the Pittsburgh box score, Marcus Howard only got 4 minutes in that entire game, and I think that was his lowest total for the season. Sorry, folks, that's my dog.
Quiet, June.
It will be interesting to see whether he continues to play the hot hand, or whether Rousey gets a little bit longer of a leash. I know we're talking on offense here. Rousey did have a handful of defensive miscues that I noticed, particularly in the second half of the Pittsburgh game, which were, along the brain fart order. So I think those are fixable. So I think it's an interesting question about, if you're talking between Tracy, Rousey, and Howard, which one of those do you lose the most on defense? And I don't know if there's a clear answer in that realm. But I agree. I thought Rousey played great on offense. I think he, almost more than anything, he added a spark, a certain je ne sais quoi to the team that I think was lacking there. And Matt helped.
Somebody spent some time in France.
and I think helped add a little bit of that too. It's, this has been one of my things since before the season started. We need a defensive identity, and we need someone out there. Jawan provides it from time to time, getting steals and breakaway dunks and layups. We just don't play with the passion on defense that I think we need to. And Rousey provided a little bit of that, and Helt did too.
I was really impressed with what I've watched of Helt, at least in the Pitt game, moving his feet on defense when he was guarding Michael Young. You think of Helt as being maybe the less athletic of our two centers, but he certainly has size on Luke. So when you have those more burly forwards that we're going to have to go up against this year, it'll be key for Helt to be able to spend some minutes out there guarding these guys, and I think that he showed some upside in being able to stay with Young on a few of those possessions. He was able to convert on the offensive end too. Can he get offensive rebounds, putbacks, and can he move his feet and stay with the bigger players on defense? I mean, I thought it was an A-plus game out of him, but when you look at the overall scheme of things in this game, we had a 15-point lead and lost.
Yep.
That's inexcusable. How much of that had to do with they played almost till midnight the night before and then turned around and play in the afternoon, I don't know. But we have enough bodies that we should be able to run out there and keep guys fresh.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the offense here against Pittsburgh, particularly in the second half. I think one of the best things from the first two games against Vanderbilt and Howard was our ball movement. The ball was always moving. In the second half against Pittsburgh, we shot 30% from the field. Pittsburgh shot 60% from the field, which is almost the inverse from the first half against Pittsburgh. So I think our offense, for whatever reason, we reverted to really what we looked like last year. The ball was stagnant. We couldn't get it into the post. You heard Fran Fraschilla talking a lot about how the art of entry passes was lost, maybe aside from Hauser. We couldn't get the ball into the post. And when you can't get the ball into the post to one of your best players, your best player, until 10 minutes left in the game, that's a problem. But also you just got Dwayne, Juwan Johnson, and Tracy kind of passing it around the top of the perimeter, and then we're driving to the lane and getting bad shots when the shot clock's winding down. The offense has regressed over the past two games. Some of it's on the opponent, But, I don't know. Did you guys see the same thing kind of in our offensive regression the past 2 games?
It's inexcusable when your player that shoots the highest percentage from the field only gets 5 shots. Nationally ranked, shooting basically 65%. If you're shooting 65% from the field and you get 5 shots, it doesn't make any sense to me. And we need to be able to feed the post better. And maybe that is one of the results of having shorter point guards that we don't look at as much typically, but it is a little more difficult to make an entry pass when you're only 5'10".
Exactly right. And I think that's why we've seen maybe Hauser being the best at it so far, is his height allows him to do that. But the thing I took from that second half, Rousey played well. It was good to see him kind of display his talent a little bit. But when we got to rely on him and him alone in clutch situations, I mean, he took 3 out of the 4 final shots. One wasn't even a shot, it was a turnover. Then he missed it. Then we had to rely on a freshman, Hauser, shooting an NBA range 3-pointer to try to take the lead. And then Rousey chucks up the shot at the end. I mean, we got to have a better offensive game plan than that, especially at the end. And through that whole second half, you're right, Mike. It was either Dwayne or Juwan kind of trying to take it on themselves to get into the lane, and they ended up forcing some bad shots. Rousey forced a couple bad shots, although most of them turned out pretty well for him. But yeah, when we didn't get the ball to Luke, that was the thing about me. It's like the seniors, like Juwan, Luke, and Reinhardt, like kind of try to take over. Try to impose your will. Like, you guys are the most experienced people on this team. You can see the lead slipping away. I really wanted to see more out of them to try to demand the ball and put up some good shots. And we weren't able to do that at all. And, Rousey's his first meaningful minutes on a major conference team. I'm going to call the Big East major conference team, even though a lot of national writers don't.
That's right.
Woo! Then all of a sudden we're relying on this 5'10" guard to basically, win us the game in the last minute. That was the most frustrating thing for me.
Thinking off the top of your head, the guys that have been in the program the longest, who have the most experience, who should know better, I'm going to say Dwayne Wilson, Juwan Johnson, and Luke Fisher. There were... everyone remembers about the 10-minute mark, about the 12-minute mark, somewhere in there. Pittsburgh went on a run where Michael Young got hot, and anything he was throwing up was falling in, nothing but net. We went from about a 8 to 7 point lead to tie game in this stretch. And
Mike, if I may butt in real quick here.
Yeah.
Can I butt in real quick?
Butt away.
We had a 10-point lead at the 12:58 mark when Michael Young hit a jumper to put us up 8. 12:05, he hits another jumper after a Tracy turnover. 11:26, after a Juwan missed shot, he hits another jumper. 10:58, after a Dwayne missed shot, he hits a layup. Luke missed jumper. 10:33, he hits another layup. So 2 minutes and 25 seconds pass, and we lost that 10-point lead, and it was a tie game.
To one guy.
All 5 shots.
And those offensive possessions that you mentioned in between there, Young hit his first shot. Tracy comes down, has a bad turnover. He gets lost in the middle of the lane, has a bad turnover. Our next offensive possession, Juwan Johnson, a guy who should know better, drives to the lane, doesn't have a shot, decides to throw it up anyway. Maybe he got fouled. Next offensive possession, Dwayne drives to the lane, tries to throw it up, gets swatted away against a 6'9" guy. Dwayne's 6'2". And then finally, the next offensive possession we have, after another Michael Young shot, we get it into Luke in the post for the first time in the second half. That encapsulates the game. That is not how we need to play offense if we want to play well. I don't know if we revert to that because, we get tentative and we get scared, and that's how we played last year. But we can play better than that. Pitt is not a significantly better team than us, and that offensive stretch, I think, defines who we are at this point, and we need to improve on that. The coaches need to address that right away.
Been a lot of hemming and hawing about the 4 out, 1 in, and how much space it gives Luke to operate, blah, blah, blah. And, with our deadly shooters out on the perimeter, it should give Luke this space. But you didn't really see that in these games, It's like, it's not that we're bad shooters on the perimeter. It's just, I don't know if we're not getting the ball into guys' hands in position to get their shot off quickly or what it is. Somehow, these teams' defenses are able to both get out to the line and guard our shooters and collapse onto Luke without us being able to get the ball in at all.
Yeah, but what keys open shots is dribble penetration, and when our guys were taking the ball to the hole, like Tracy Carter, we talked so much about going into the year, he's been basically invisible, and when he goes to the lane, Jawan, who has been good throughout the year so far, taking the ball to the hoop, but not particularly in these two games. And Dwayne, when they actually got past their defender, they were throwing up bad shots and not finding open guys. And that was huge.
Yep, I agree. That's a great point. When you get to the hole, and that's what you saw in that stretch, is that instead of looking behind you, having the eyes in your back of your head for Hauser out on the perimeter, or God forbid, Caton Reinhardt out on the perimeter. Those are going to be better shots than you trying to throw up a layup against a guy who's 7 inches taller than you. That's what our experienced players need to be better at recognizing, and hopefully the coaches can drill that into them over the next few days and in the weaker games we have coming up.
We need to be able to attack guys that are guarding from, first off, within the circle. If they're inside the circle, go right at them. They can't draw a charge on you, We are 39th in the nation in free throw percentage, shooting 78% as a team, which is excellent. However, we just don't get to the line nearly enough. Only 15% of our points come from free throws, and that's 305th in the nation. So how do we draw fouls? I don't know if maybe we weren't getting calls or not, but I don't think that our guys seek out contact as much as maybe they should for how good of free throw shooters they are. And I think we maybe mentioned this before, but we just need to be able to get calls at the rim in order to be effective in scoring via the free throw line.
This is not attributing any of the Marquette losses to this, but do you guys feel that the refereeing has been different this year? I'm not saying tinged in one way or another, but it just has a different flow to it this year. And I know there were some points of emphasis that we had. I don't know if we talked about them on the pod, but they're looking at different things. The flow of the game just feels a little bit different this year from the ref standpoint. It doesn't quite mesh with what we've seen even last year. Or is that just me?
I think every year they're working on the points of emphasis in these preseason tournaments, so it always feels a little awkward, like the refs suck. And the studies have shown that when you have the points of emphasis, they hit them pretty hard early on, and then they kind of fizzle out throughout the year.
Right.
So that remains to be seen. I'm sure we'll still see Big East basketball when we get into the Big East conference season. But no, I would agree. It's kind of a awkward feel out there.
Especially the Pittsburgh game, I thought there were an awful lot of ticky-tack fouls, especially when there was some hedging on some screens and guys are trying to move their feet, and there's maybe some gentle brushing. that was called a foul, and it was like, what is the point of that? It's like two abdomens rubbing together. I don't know, that doesn't.
Gross.
It doesn't. That doesn't really constitute any foul on either side, I didn't think. So I thought there's a lot of ticky-tacks.
I mean, the travels for me, I love calling travels to a T, but they're so strict on that first move without the ball where the guy, he'll jab and then he'll cut right, and they'll call travel on that every time. And yet, when guys dribble into the lane, and even Jawan's guilty of this sometimes, but they don't call the travel on the spin move when it's blatant that a guy's taking 3 steps, but they're so fast to call it on that perimeter move, and it's just, you have to let the guy explode into his drive off the perimeter. It's just, I hate that.
So I want to make sure we get to some positives, because I think there were, there's some positive takeaways from several different players going forward that I think we can continue to build upon. But before we get to those positives, what do you guys think about Caton Reinhardt? He was a guy from USC who we expected to be a scorer, a relatively efficient scorer. To this point in the season, we have not seen much of anything from him. He's made some hustle plays on defense. He's knocked down a couple of shots, but by and large, there have been a lot of bricks. There have been some boneheaded plays. The play where he picked that guy's pocket at half court and then proceeded to slow down as he was going in for the breakaway layup. I mean, he got to the free throw line. But what's your prognosis on Caden Reinhardt? I'm not sold by any stretch of the imagination yet.
And just to tack on some statistics here,
yep.
He's used in the highest percentage of possessions of anyone on our team, and he takes the highest percentage of shots when he's on the court of anyone on the team.
Unbelievable.
As far as usage.
Yeah, you said hoping to be efficient, and that's exactly what he's not been.
Deficient.
Taking a high volume shots and not a good percentage doesn't offer you much on defense right now, which you want him to have because he's one of your biggest bodies out there, and his weak side defense has been poor. He's not overly athletic to where you can trust him to get, or really for that matter, that big of a hustler on defense. You don't see him getting a whole lot of rebounds. So right now he's not offering much. Hopefully that changes. But right now he, especially in against Pitt, he was a detriment to the team.
And look, we're not trying to beat up on a kid here. We that's not the intent at all. But from what we kind of projected and what we'd seen from Caden at previous stops, I think legitimately more was expected from him. So this is not an intent to beat up on Caden, but looking at his stat line in the Pittsburgh game, he went 1 of 8 from the field, 1 of 3 from the 3-point line. In the Michigan game, he went 1 of 8 from the field and 1 of 6 from the 3-point line. So statistically, there's no possible way that can continue throughout the season. Through that, he needs to keep shooting, but he needs to be more efficient at it. Don't jack up threes with 27 seconds left on the shot clock when you've got a guy 3 feet from you. Make smarter shots, be more efficient, make better plays. We're not saying stop shooting. That's absolutely not it. But you have to be smarter. That's not only a message for Caden, but for the rest of the team.
I don't think that he lacks skills at all.
He's got a good stroke. It's not a bad stroke.
He reminds you of that guy that you play with in pickup where you just, once you pass him the ball, you might as well start jogging down on defense because, you know he's going to be the one shooting it. If he's spotted up on the 3-point line, he's a good 3-point shooter. We just need to cut down on the shots off the dribble, I think, for Caden. I mean, in his mind, he sees Jordan. For us, we all see Caden Reinhardt, So I think it's one of those cases where the confidence just goes like a little too far. And I think Wojo has the ability to pare him back. I think the best thing for Caden is Sam Hauser and his efficiency. Hauser has the length, the efficiency, and Reinhardt has like the hustle, the willingness to look for a shot. And I think they balance each other out well. And it's kind of cool to see how they split playing time, but I think, what do they say, steel sharpens steel or whatever. As they work against each other in practice throughout the year and watch the other one out there on the court when the other one's sitting on the bench, they're a good foil for each other in that they can see what their deficiencies are in the opposite player kind of being out there.
We're 4 games into the season, and Caden's been a good player throughout his career, and he's been a pretty good scorer. So I think it may be, and probably is, a case of him trying to prove himself on a new team. Hopefully, as the season progresses, he kind of settles in, realizes that, he doesn't have to be our go-to scorer because we have plenty of guys that can score the ball. And hopefully he just kind of settles in and finds his role that we need him to have to be successful, because we do need him out there with his size. But he needs to improve on his shot selection and his defense.
Just want to give Hanif a shout out. I don't think that we've talked about him enough. We talked coming into the season about how Hanif needs to turn down the turnovers. He didn't have any in the Pitt game, and he had 2 assists. He's actually what was it last year? I think he was like 35% of the time turning the ball over. This year he's only down to 9.4%.
Wow.
And second best on the team, basically behind Luke. So good job by Hanif for the strides that he's made in terms of ball handling and not looking like a freshman.
I wanted to see him to have the ball in his hands when we were down by 1 against Pitt too. When Hauser took that shot, I wanted Hanif to have the ball. But,
I called for Hauser.
Hanif or Juwan, either of them.
We had a text chain going. One of the things we were discussing was, who do you think gets the last shot against Pittsburgh? And as we responded, and I think every single one of us had a different response. I went with Cheatham as number 1, Rousey as number 2. Pete Mohan, you went with Hauser. Pete Worth, who'd you go? Who was your call?
I just said right now that I wanted Hanif, but I just came up with that right now. I think at the time I said Juwan.
Yeah.
Basically, I wanted somebody going to the hoop, and those are our 2 best guys. But I wanted Juwan at the time.
Juwan has mastered that running glasser, hasn't he?
That high glass, yeah.
Going to the right. I mean, he makes that shot every time, 99.9%.
I still don't always think it's going to go in. I'm like, oh God, here it goes again, and then it drops in without touching the rim. So Marquette's got 3 games coming up, kind of throughout the Thanksgiving break. Play Ooey Pooey here in the next few days, and then we have a couple other games. If you look on the Ken Palm site, we have at least a 92% chance and sometimes 98% and 99% chance of winning these 3 games. So we didn't want to focus in too much on them. But looking forward to these 3 games, what do you guys think the team can take away as positives from the first 4 games of the season?
One positive, and it's something that we kind of expected before the year, is our depth. Just that we have guys with different skill sets that we can run out there. It leads to a faster paced game, and we just have guys with different skill sets. Obviously, we'd like to have more big guys. I think that certainly the depth has been a strength. Shooting has been improved. If you would have told us, I mean, not looking at the schedule, but just looking at the shooting percentages from our guys, Rousey had a great 1 game, but Hauser has been lights out. I mean, kind of got that Novak stature where if his feet are set and he's, the guy isn't contesting really well, you kind of expect that shot to go in already, and that's saying a lot for a true freshman. Just across the board, I think that our 3-point shooting has been really impressive.
I don't know how much we're going to gain out of these 3 games. I mean, the thing I want to see, we're going to be getting into these much more difficult games. Who's going to be our go-to guys down the stretch in crunch time? Because Rousey getting the ball, I know I talked about it before, Rousey getting the ball, yeah, he had a good game up to that point, but are we going to go with who's ever got the hot hand in particular game? I don't really like that per se. I want 1 or 2 guys that we know that we can trust with the ball. I was very disappointed by that last minute of the Pittsburgh game with 3 possible, anything can happen obviously, but 3 potential blowouts in these next 3 games. I don't really know how much is going to be gained exactly, but like Pete said, I mean, with the depth, it's good to have everybody getting out there, getting minutes and getting repetitions. I'd like to see more out of our veterans for sure. Dwayne, Juwan, and Luke and Reinhardt, we've already talked about, but I like to see those guys really, really step up their games.
I think Dwayne looks confident out there. I don't know. I mean, just
I agree.
His demeanor on the court. He had 11 points in 13 minutes against Pitt, which is off the charts. And 4 rebounds to boot, which is great for a guy that's 6'2" or whatever he is. When you look at Dwayne, he looks like he wants to put the team on his shoulders, but I don't know if he's earned that trust with Wojo yet. Obviously, we saw Rousey get the ball at the end of the game. A guy that only has impacted the game in the 1 game that he was given the ball in the clutch, which is kind of crazy. I was vouching for Hauser to get the ball on that play, which is hypocritical to what I just said anyway. But we need to give Dwayne a chance to maybe earn a few more minutes out there. And I don't know if they come from Cheatham or Juwan or where they come from, but I would like to see Dwayne get more than 13 minutes.
So here's my rosy outlook for the next few games. I think, and I'll start it off this way, I think there are a number of questions with how this team handles adversity on the court during a game. I think it's evidence in the Pitt game. I'm not going to draw too many conclusions from the Michigan game because I think Michigan's that much better than us, but we should have beat Pittsburgh. I think this team has the pieces to be good, but I think this team has a problem with reverting to past iterations of itself when we're under pressure or under duress. That's the point where we're losing the lead, where Michael Young's throwing up anything and it's going in. That's the point where we need our leaders to step up. we've got the pieces to be successful. We just need to make smarter decisions, both from coaches and players. So I think they need to continue to coach these guys. This is on the coaches too. This isn't only on players. So hopefully we can continue to see that improvement. Since we don't have big Marquette games coming up, I do want to give you guys one more chance to throw in your last thoughts on Marquette. But folks, we're also in a fantasy football league, and the two gentlemen I'm talking to this weekend are playing against each other this weekend. Big matchup, playoff implications. We've got Morty going up against that kid. How are you guys feeling about today's matchup?
Well, we know how much everyone likes to listen to other people talk about their fantasy teams.
Yeah.
But this is huge. This is huge for me, for that kid. And that kid needs a huge performance out of his running backs, of which I have very little. And I need a good repeat performance from Ryan Matthews and another one from Jeremy Hill. I look to see Amari Cooper have a huge game again on Monday night on national TV and carry me to victory.
Yeah, you only got 25 points out of Drew Brees, and I don't know if that's going to be enough to carry you. I think you need like 50.
Well, I look at it, he only got 31 points combined between Brees and Kelvin Benjamin, so I'm feeling pretty good going into today. Number 1 pick overall, Ezekiel Elliott. I'm feeling like I made the right choice there. And then being able to pick up Melvin Gordon in the 3rd round. He's on bye this week, so you're lucky, neighbor. Look, I know Morty is a difficult mountain to climb, but Mount Morty, he's won, the last 3 championships? Feeling pretty good about my squad right now, so watch out, neighbor.
A lot of good NFL football on today that we need to get to. But before we do that, fellas, any final last thoughts?
Rotation in big games. Who are we going to rely on? Who can we rely on game by game? I remember talking about this before the season started in one of our early episodes. Who is going to be the mix of guys? Because we got a lot of them. You know, we can't just keep on throwing guys out there kind of willy-nilly against these, inferior opponents. And yeah, that will work well against them. But when we can't find a set rotation against these good teams, and maybe some people aren't playing as well, we're going to have to find that out. Tracy Carter, where's Tracy Carter been? I want to see more out of Tracy Carter.
Pete Mohan.
I just want to say, don't be disappointed. I mean, we lost to a team that looks like they're going to be top 3 in the Big Ten. And then we lost to a team that's probably a middle-of-the-pack ACC team, which, it's not like you're losing to DePaul, okay? Don't get your hopes down. This team has a lot of talent. When you have 11 moving parts on a team, it's going to take that team a longer time to gel, and especially when such a high percentage of minutes are coming from guys that weren't playing with us last year. So give this team some time. But with that said, we have to win against Georgia when we get there, and God, I hope we look competitive against Wisconsin, because otherwise we have really nothing else to hang our hat on in the non-conference outside of Vandy.
Folks, there you have it. That's going to do it for us today here at the Real Chili Podcast. Hope you enjoyed the show. We will be back in a week or so after our 3 cupcake games to preview Georgia and talk about them and talk about what we can expect from the team for the rest of December before we enter the Big East Conference schedule. Thanks so much for listening today. I'm Mike Lavender signing off for Pete Mohan and Pete Worth. We'll talk to you soon here on the Real Chili Podcast.